I just said.
Yeah, check
Hey.
out that gavel. That's the fun part.
Bang, bang. All right.
I know.
Call the meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority Board to order. Susan, would you please read the roll?
With pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Wednesday, September 2nd, 2015 Ann Arbor DDA Board Meeting. Bob Gutzel, Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Rick Klopp. Here. Joan Lowenstein. Here. Alan Williams.
Here.
Sean Mowat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Steve Powers.
Here.
Sandy Smith. Here. John Split.
Here.
Phil Weiss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Here. I hope so.
Thank you. Well, with that, we'll move right along to audience participation. First up is Russ Collins of the Michigan Theater Foundation, and Russ, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I'm here with my colleagues Lee Berry and Barbara Twist, and we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the new State Theater. The State Theater originally opened in 1942, and it had a very famous architect by the name of C. Howard Crane, who designed the Fox Theater in Detroit, the Orchestra Hall in Detroit, Detroit Opera House, as well as about 300 theaters around the country, including Irving Berlin's Music Box Theater in New York, which is still a Broadway theater. And for Mary Pickford, he designed the United Artists Theater, which is still operating in Los Angeles. Lots of things happened at the State Theater between 1942 and 1999 when we began programming it. And then in 2013, the theater came under threat. In 2014, just about a year ago, we purchased the theater. In November of last year, we did a planning study. This year, we've been involved in getting leadership for the campaign and doing some major gift fundraising. I'm happy to say that Judy Rummelhart and Ambassador Ron Weiser are the honorary chairs, and the campaign chairs are Martha Darling and Gil Ullman, and we have a good bunch of community folks that are going to help us with this campaign. In 2016, we're going to announce the public campaign and set the final goal for the campaign, and then by spring of 2017, we expect to reopen the new State Theater. Now, the DDA apparently is proud of the State Theater. This was a screen capture from your website, and we believe that the mission of this project and the mission of the DDA line up very nicely, especially if you look at the mission and the nature of this project. We also want to make sure that this project, and we believe this project lines up with the DDA's 8 priorities, which are listed in front of you, and the 5 that are highlighted are the ones that we think most align with what the DDA's goals are. In terms of identity, what is more iconic than looking down Liberty Street and seeing the Michigan Theater marquee, the State Theater marquee, Burton Tower behind, and the active street that's there? It is an iconic picture of Ann Arbor, maybe only second to the University of Michigan football stadium. The DDA, the Chamber of Commerce, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the university all use that shot as exemplary of what Ann Arbor is about. And so the preservation of that marquee, the preservation of that building and its active use, we think is critical. In terms of infrastructure, this project is not an infrastructure project in terms of streets or utility infrastructures for the downtown, but it is critical in terms of this building's infrastructure. Most particularly, there is no handicap accessibility, there is no elevator in this building, the roof also needs some more HVAC system, so this project is much focused on the infrastructure of this particular building. Not just infrastructure will be dealt with, however. We're also going to see beautiful restoration of some of the Art Deco elements in the lobby there. And in terms of the theaters, those will be made to be comfortable and wonderful places to experience cinema, which this town is absolutely passionate about. We also see that business encouragement is a critical part of this. The Michigan Theater and the State Theater are key drivers of traffic to the area. It's kind of amazing how much traffic they drive. And the State Theater is actually a critical part of our economic sustainability as we have focused on cinema as the project that the cultural product that the community supports the most. In terms of development partnership, this will allow us to work very aggressively with the other owner of the State Theater that owns the Urban Outfitter part of that building as we work with the facade of that building and other infrastructure parts of that building. And just a couple more seconds, and the sustainability is right. Now, the elevator part, we're estimated at about $500,000. The marquee part is about $250,000. The total project is, for this part of it, the total project is about a $4 million project or so. This part of it is $750,000, and if you guys would consider making a contribution of $150,000 for 5 years, it would allow us to accomplish this. Thank you for your time. We view this as a once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity to take advantage of this, and thank you for the extra 45 seconds.
Is that up right now on the marquee?
It can be, and recognition is something that I know the DDA is concerned about, and it's something that I think we have shown that we've been able to do quite effectively and will continue to do. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Russ. Next is Alan Haber.
Hello, DDA. I just got off a plane from Lyon, France, where I've been in the Burgundy countryside for the last 4 months, traveling some, seeing cities from the European perspective, and which has reinforced what I've been here often to speak with you about, and those that have been here a while know I'm a regular. My focus is the library lot, and I'm seeking to persuade the City Council and you to see this piece of central Ann Arbor property not to be developed as a commercial property, but to be developed for public use. And indeed to see that central block of Ann Arbor with the library, the parking structure, Liberty Plaza, and the surrounding area as a central city block, as a heart of Ann Arbor, as a place over the years to develop as a variety of public uses, beginning with the park on the surface, eventually putting a plaza over the ramps of the parking structure, and a civic building over part of Library Lane. So to see this adjacent to the library as a central public facility of Ann Arbor, better than using it for any of the private commercial uses. It would be a place that the town would develop and develop a culture in over the years. So that's what I'm hoping you will put into your mind, counter to the general view that has prevailed. See this as to be sold for some kind of profit and the benefit, economic benefit from that. There's a community benefit much greater of using this central property for public use development, and that's what I'm hoping I can have an opportunity to describe to the City Council and at greater length to yourselves. So I just wanted to say I'm back in Ann Arbor. I can see you face to face, though I have sent communications on this quest. Some people consider it at the windmill, but it is really in the best interest of Ann Arbor to see this central place developed in a particular way, highlighting the centrality of Ann Arbor, the place of the neighborhoods, the history of the town, the ecology of the town as a place for everyone, And there's the creativity, the money, the talent in Ann Arbor to actually do this, not as part of the city budget, but as really a public project to see how do we take this piece of public land and make it something that the generations to come will be glad we did it now, rather than sell it to any of the, could be very good private investments. A private investment can go elsewhere, can go on the Klein lot, can go on other city properties, or it'd be very good if there was more pressure on the private landowners that have buildable land. Is that 1 second?
1 minute.
1 minute. So, well, that's basically my message. This is what I have been endeavoring to pursue and persuade, and I hope that people who have questions would address me, and I would try and work this. I want to see a project that actually deals with the problems that people haven't raised there of them, as the city attorney has described this, our difficulties in any central city public place. But all of us can be part of creating a place for the culture of peace and nonviolence, for the children of the world, for the children of Ann Arbor, for the future generations. And I hope you will, stretch your imagination a little bit, because basically this has not been on the horizon. And from from the request for proposal 743 right through now, there's been no discussion of a public use proposal, and there is one there that wants your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A new iconic image can be created there.
Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay. See none? We'll move on. Reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter, the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Committee.
Citizens Advisory Committee did not meet in the month of August. We followed your example with regard to that. So last night we had a lot of things to discuss, particularly the zoning changes that were passed in July. The zoning changes that we've been working for the last 3 years. They were passed unanimously by the City Council as well. And we also discussed some of those needed changes that are still out there that we're going to be working for. And of course, we always support everything that the state and Michigan Theater want. We're supporting the best, I think, theater area that I've seen in a small town of this size. It's wonderful, I mean, to be in there. It's wonderful to live nearby. And certainly we want to support everything that we possibly can with regard to what they want to do. We also, last night, the Citizens Advisory Council discussed and approved the contents of a letter I was asked to write to city planners, Wendy Ramson, Alexis DeLeo, and Megan Mason-Minnick. She's the planning consultant on possible changes in downtown zoning premiums. And that letter expressed again our belief that premiums should not be granted at any time if they have a negative impact upon the historic character of downtown or the context of near downtown residential and historic neighborhoods. Although some folks actually reject this principle as too vague and impossible to attain or codify, I think the Ordinance Revision Committee memorandum of July 17th, by reducing the availability of some of the current FAR premiums, actually takes a step in the right direction. Stricter requirements, fewer premiums, less threat to neighborhoods. Most of us believe that our zoning should more clearly reflect what we want in size, use, and public amenities as stated in our city master plans. Consideration of context is very important in those plans. And some of us, not all of us, believe that phasing out of the use of premiums would be a desirable goal. Let's tell developers what we want and not provide premiums that could produce what we don't want. Our recent effort to correct downtown zoning mistakes was a step in the right direction. We believe master plans, our zoning, and premiums should regularly be revised and made compatible as needed. The provisions for workforce housing are desirable and legal, and we support workforce housing. We believe that we should encourage them with approval of lower minimum unit size, but not with premiums that may threaten the context of nearby neighborhoods. And all of us would support a recommendation that, and I quote here, that the Design Review Board develop mandatory design rules for the pedestrian level in the downtown. And that comes out of the Megan report as it's developing. But those design rules must be made clear to developers before they complete their development plans and before they lay claim to any premium advantages. There must be no question about what character areas and zoning requirements demand. We recommend that consideration be given to requiring major project developers to engage in a broad discussion with the Design Review Board as a first step in the approval process, including negative impacts that need to be avoided. So they're aware of the situation that we have here. They're not coming here with a plan already set. And then they should be required to appear again after they've put together development plans that meet the requirements made clear in the first Design Review Board meeting. No compliance, no premiums. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next, DDA members' communications. Or any communications from any DDA board members?
I have two items. One regarding the library lane. There will be community engagement meetings October 8th and 9th for community members to receive information on two of the developers that are moving through the process, and for those developers then to take what they hear from the community and possibly change their proposals for a final recommendation to City Council sometime likely in November. The council would then decide whether to choose one or both of the developers for final negotiations, or none of the above. Second, on the Greenway, despite some significant turnover from our planning manager, Wendy Ramson, we are proceeding with various planning initiatives, and one that I think is of interest to the DDA. I know there are several, but one that is of interest to the DDA that I'm prepared to talk about is the Greenway Master Plan. And then that will be proceeding. Connie Pulsifer, who I think some of you know and have worked with, will be our lead staff on developing a Greenway Master Plan. So she'll be helping coordinate the engagement and interface with community groups and agencies such as the DDA as that master plan starts to take shape. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other communications? Executive Director Communications, Susan.
I've got a few things for you. First of all, I want to let you know that last week we had a grand opening for our bike house at Ann and Ashley. We have a great success on our hands. There were a lot of people there, a lot of businesses that have taken those parking spaces, and all shared to me their great gratitude to the DDA for the investment. I want to thank you, Sandy, for speaking on behalf of the DDA. John, thank you for being there as well. I think it was great fun, and we have another bike house, and a beautiful one at that. I want to let you know that in the last month, one of our other projects has received accolades, but of a different kind. Our Downtown Street Design Manual has received an IDA Merit Award. It has also received a Michigan Association of Planning Excellence Award. And for that, just so you know, that's a best practice winner. And they only give one per category, and this is vetted by professionals in other states.
IDA
International Downtown Association. I'm sorry, I should not have done that. But it is our professional organization, and as an international organization, I was on a selection committee, didn't get to vet our own proposal. There were 80-something submittals, so there's a lot coming from all over North America, the big cities as well as some smaller ones, Europe and Africa and other locations. So it's a big deal to get a merit award. In the Michigan Planning Association Award, again, I just want to say to that, it's vetted by professionals in other states. So it's not as if we had an insight on that one. It's a big deal that people in our profession are citing it as being extraordinary. And we're getting a lot of requests to talk about it. Amber is going to be presenting on this at the Michigan Planning Conference in Detroit in October. I've been asked to speak in Houston on this. And we already know that Grand Rapids is looking at taking on a very similar project. So kudos to the Ann Arbor DDA for this design manual. It's a big deal. Another project we're underway with that you will see shortly, and I'm giving a shout out to Al because he's helping us, is our State of the Downtown report. The data that we capture in this is something we use all the time, and it's something that others use as well. It gives us not only an encapsulation of the data about downtown, how many theater seats or how many acres of property do we have, but it gives us a sense of the trends and the changes. How many jobs came in this year? How many businesses are new this year? Building permits and so forth. So it's a chance to capture that, understanding the evolution of downtown as ever going. It's a wonderful opportunity to learn, for instance, how many residents do we have for all the newspaper articles. You should see this, I believe, sometime in the next month. We have a new design, and I think, as always, it'll be a good project. And then the last thing is to say, you're going to hear a little later about our capital improvements projects. We have released a request for qualifications that went out a couple weeks ago. What we're looking for is a design team to help guide us and our public input processes as we go forward with our first two projects, which is a shared project with the city at 5th and Detroit near the Farmers Market, and also our South University project. We are using that design manual as the Bible on this. This is what every bit of the design will frame around. We're going to get responses back in about a week. And we have interviews scheduled, I think, on the 17th of September. Our goal is to bring you a recommendation at your October meeting, so we're moving apace on that. Any questions? staff are here to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have approval of the minutes for the July and August 2015 meetings. We hear a motion to approve. Second. Support. Any comment on the minutes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Subcommittee reports. Operations Committee, John Split and Keith Orr.
I will start us off with a resolution you'll find on pages 25 and 28, and I would like to move that resolution.
Support.
The resolution is to approve a new parking contract with 101 North Main. There has been a contract in place which has been extended since 1984, I believe. That contract is now expired, and the owner of the building would like us to start with a new contract, essentially, which guarantees certain number of parking places for a certain number of years. They have leases that guarantee parking places, and they now have 179 parking places which they are paying for month by month. They are requesting that a certain number of those be under contract with a premium.
Okay. Discussion.
Got a question, John. So the timeline here for the number of parking permits, September 1st, 2017, 113 permits, 2019, 80, 2023, 60. Is that then it would reduce to that? To
Reduce
those
the number of
numbers?
guaranteed permits. Again, the permits they're carrying will be, on a month-to-month basis, will be up to them.
Okay. Sure we're all clear. Thanks.
Any other comments? John?
I was going to wait, but I am personally not in favor of extending the contract. I think it's a perfectly acceptable arrangement in my eyes for permits to be carried month to month. Those permits are not taken away unless they are not paid for. I think that gives us the flexibility we need to get the permits into hands of people who, other developments, other buildings that may want them. It gives us a chance to get those back into the system immediately, and I'm not in favor of extending, or I'm not in favor of this contract.
This is specifically for Ann Ashley, right?
Correct.
And this is just me remembering the discussion in prior meetings. That's a structure that we're usually trying to push people into, though, right? Like that's the lighter structure.
No, I don't believe so. There's a waiting list for
Okay.
for all of our structures. That structure, and again, there's a hotel that has yet to open. There's a fair amount of, I think, activity in the area, new development activity, infill activity. So I'm concerned about that.
I may remember. Oh, it's on the weekends at farmers market.
Right, the daytime needs are, there are times there's like a full or 6 spots left. In the evening and weekends is a different matter, but during the daytime it's very.
John?
Just to fill in the blanks too, I think we've got our contract with the county is for around 300 spaces that are committed. So that's a healthy percentage of, and there's some issues up in the air with that. So there's a lot going on.
And that's the same structure, right? That's Ann Ashley.
And so the other side of that is that if we didn't go through this, we wouldn't alleviate anything, most likely because they would just keep the permits. So it doesn't immediately like relieve parking spots in any way. It just is a need that they have for a lease, I believe, or their lease requirements, and something that transpired. So it just doesn't. Point of information is it doesn't relieve anything.
I just want to point out on the positive side that it does bring in some more money, given that there's a premium attached to the guaranteed prices.
for if we, the
If
resolution.
if
yeah.
indeed we were, yeah,
Right.
to go forward.
Sandy?
Just a point of clarification. I thought you said up to these amounts. The contract doesn't read that way. To me, it looks like it is, that it's 173, it will start then, it goes immediately to 113. And so they're obligated at 113 with the premium.
Yes, I believe that's the case.
Is that the intent?
So the intent is they are currently holding 173, and they're paying for them. They would like to contract for 113 of those, and the rest would remain month to month. And then the contracted number would reduce, but it is of that total that they're currently paying for.
Okay, but they'll be paying for 2 years, 113 at a premium rate.
Yeah, it's a 20%.
It's not up to them to choose on that number.
I'm sorry, what do you
It's
mean?
not up to them to say, well, we're only gonna take 100 of those.
No, this is their
113.
request. We are reflecting their request.
I guess I don't, I think that the goal is to move them off of the contract, but they do have lease agreements that have been in place, and I don't think that I wanna get involved in making that more difficult to lease in that area. It's strong right now, but that building has had its issues over the years. It's not always completely full and easy to rent out, so I think we have to look at it historically rather than the short term. So I think as long as I see it phasing out, I'm okay with going forward with this.
John, then
One other piece, it seems to me when we've had discussions about committing parking spaces that we've been trying to move in a direction to not commit to one specific structure. When we had discussions about forestry structure and so forth. And so that's one other aspect of this, of whether there's any value in potentially committing to permits without it being tied directly to Ashley. Now, obviously, it's a pretty good hoof to the next closest structure from there, but I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, as much as anything from a policy perspective, you know, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to move towards, it has, my understanding, it's always been trying to move towards flexibility. Demand management.
You were next. You have comment on
I was
this?
just gonna ask,
Yeah.
so for historical versus current, if we did renew this now, we would still be able to, if things were to change and not be as strong, we could then offer the spaces at a future date, right?
Yeah, I think that they would, without that guarantee, they wouldn't put it in the lease anymore, right?
Right.
So they would need to make sure that any future leases and extensions of those leases are address that.
Which I think they are doing, this is to fulfill their current lease obligations, right?
right.
The
Some
other
of
thing
them,
was,
one of them's quite long.
yeah, one of them is till 2023. Susan, didn't I can't remember that gentleman's name. Didn't he say that he was going to give back the 73 that they're not going to use?
Yeah, so this is a change from what was,
Oh, so he's not going to give them back?
this is their request. So what we heard, they would like to be able to keep them. So,
Oh,
Yeah,
but
what we
and
have
those would be
here-
straight month to month,
still straight month to month.
just not under contract.
Exactly.
That is a significant change. Initially, he was like, oh, I'll put those back in the system, bring more people into the mix. This is what I wanted to contract on, right?
Steve, I have a question for John, but with this information, is it appropriate to refer it back to the operations committee if there was a change in the proposal from what the operations committee considered? And my question was going to be, or is this a recommendation from the operations committee, or is the committee only putting it forward as the resolution states?
I think that the committee decided to bring it forward to the board.
Without a recommendation?
I think that the consensus was perhaps hard to read. I think that the answer would be yes, that they are recommending to the board, but I'm not solid on that.
Yeah, I I sort of thought, I know we have been discussing this in committee for a number of months, and there's legitimate arguments on both sides, and I think we were sort of deadlocked at the operations committee on whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, and I think we're bringing it to the board to get everyone on the board's ability to weigh in on this. But I personally am torn on this. I can see very good arguments on both sides, and it's not an easy one. It certainly our idea is that we would not have contracts. This is favoring one building, but it's also one where they've had contracts and lease obligations for an extended period of time. So I say they can argue in either way.
I just wanted to clarify something that Mr. Powers asked, that this is the contract. This contract we see is the contract that was before the operations committee.
Yes.
At our last meeting. So
And
it
it's
has
a
not
contract.
changed.
And it's a contract requested by the building.
Correct.
Thank you.
So I would just go back to a comment I made last time on this subject, and this is an exception, not a rule, and it's been extended twice, and we don't do this for other people. And I think that as a businessman, he was well aware that these contracts were expiring, and if he failed to let his his tenants know that, I mean, I don't know that that is for the city to clean up.
Keith?
Well, my understanding was that there were inherited leases by the current management, so that it wasn't up to them to clean it up, that it happened.
But they knew it
beforehand.
was gonna expire, that was clear.
Yes.
And they
Yes.
knew the date of that expiration.
Right, but but those leases predate the current management, is my understanding. So I was prepared to reluctantly vote for this because, and indeed, we don't like the idea of guaranteed ones, but because of some of the historical aspects and going back to really the building of the structure. But it is, I just became aware now because I missed the last operations about not giving back the other ones, which I recall him saying that was part of what he would do, is because he wasn't that concerned about the tenants that were there. They could hang on to them if they wanted to, but it was up to them, not up to him. So that seems like a change in terms to me from what we had discussed originally.
Roger?
Yes.
I think I kind of wavered on this. I'm not sure exactly where I am at this point, but one thing I've always thought of in favor is, as somebody mentioned, that these spots are at a premium, 20% premium. So I like the idea of free money. That sounds good. So long as it doesn't constrain us. So I don't know whether, I mean, John, you're closest, and Roger, you guys are close to how the parking system works. Does the fact that they're not giving back those, technically giving them back, although we could yank them back whenever we wanted, that they're not giving them back, does that constrain us in what we want to do with that parking structure?
They can not choose to renew all of the rest of them. They can continue to use them month by month and pay for them month by month.
Right.
They're under no constraints with the remainder of the parking, with the remainder of them to do anything. They continue to pay. They may be down to only these guaranteed contract numbers by the time we get there. I doubt it. But I don't see why they can't do that with the entire lot unless we were to change our policy and not say that as long as you keep paying, you have the permits.
Right, that I know, but what I'm talking about is for our planning and what we want to do with that parking structure. Does the fact that we would have those 113 and then 80 and then whatever it is tied up, does that hurt us in our planning for that parking structure?
I can speak to it just, if this board made a decision that it wanted to bond to add to the garage, the number of permits under contract come into question. And so that is one of the places where we might add to the parking system fairly easily. It's designed to have extra floors. The maximum that we have had as a general rule of permits under contract is 10%. So if the garage is 800 or so spaces, 10% would be 80 spaces under contract. So in the next couple of years, whether or not you're adding to the garage, but that's one reason that we don't contract, is because as we go forward and are making improvements, if we want to make improvements and bond for that, that has an effect on whether it's a tax-free bond or a taxable bond. The second thing is that's an area that is seeing a lot of change. Staff went and visited with one of the new businesses that's moved into the actually terrace building, the new hotels coming in, we don't know the impacts. It's something else I think for this board to think about is on the edges of the district like that, we're seeing activity we've never seen before, and it's something to weigh as you consider this.
Does the county arrangement affect those numbers at all? For the bonding ability?
It has an impact, and it's one of the things, but as a government entity, we haven't explored that question. But typically, it's a commercial use of a tax-free bond. That's the issue, not a government use of it. So we haven't had that question asked and answered.
Is it possible for us to make a counteroffer? And I don't know how much went back and forth, but if it's kind of splitting the hairs between the two sides, we could terminate this after 17. We're not going to add anything to that structure prior to September 1st of 2017. I mean, that's just not possible considering we've never even talked about it. You know, can we merely take off the other two graduations and say, look, you've got 2 years to figure this out, and leave it at that. I'll throw in another plug is that I would really like to see this particular one structure renamed the Carytown structure so that people kind of start equating it with that. So rather than calling it Ann Ashley all the time, I'm just going to put that bug out there.
Are you proposing an amendment?
I think I was. I guess I was. But Roger, it's a fair question. What I guess I don't know is how much of this was negotiated or talked about previous to getting to this point. So
there have been a number of discussions. My understanding from Susan is that this was their last request. This is the request from the developer, and those are their numbers, not numbers that we've negotiated with them.
Okay.
Yeah, presumably they're correlated to the commitments they have in leases. What they've said they're.
Right, but that gives them.
So some would sunset at 2017, but then the other 80 wouldn't.
Susan or Joe, of the 175, if we took back the month-to-month permits, is the waiting list long enough at Ann Ashley that they'd go out right away?
We have I looked to Jada. Yeah, we do.
So
the
we have no
challenge in that
worry about
garage
that.
is we don't get permits back. Much of that garage, at least 400 spaces, are government employees, and that doesn't change very much. So yeah, the wait list accumulates. And I've seen Jada shake her head. Yes, we would definitely be able to infill behind it.
So, as long as we're tossing out ideas on this, I would say like this. It's just a request that they keep it month to month. We have no, initially it was talked about that they would give those back, and so we would do something and make the exception, go with the contract that we don't normally do to help them out, but we're also concerned about the viability of the area and bringing more businesses in and being able to get them into the monthly permit parking. So, another way we could look at it, Sandy, is we will stick to this contract, but you have to give back the rest of your month to months, and was the original idea, so that those can go back out to new businesses in the hotel or whatever in the area that to help support more development there. That's just another idea. That's the only. I'm okay with this, but that was before I knew I thought that was a big concession, was giving those back and putting it back out in the mix.
Yeah, and I didn't think that was ever on the table.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
Those other permits are for them to use month to month as they choose. We were never talking about, in my recollection, of giving any back. They are simply month to month.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
And they may hold on to all.
I thought that was his intent.
You thought so? Then I'm saying let's just take them back. if that was never on the table.
Yeah, and let me also say that I think that this contract, as proposed, is a reasonable compromise. I'm just not in favor of the idea, period.
Just on a kind of looking further down the road aspect of it, I know we're usually looking for ways to get people to come into the downtown and not park, especially people who come and park all day. And, you know, it's always trying to find the balance. Like, we don't want to rip the Band-Aid totally off because people are really reliant on the parking system and coming downtown. But at the same time, we know we have to gradually move and gradually encourage and gradually support, you know, weaning ourselves off of driving to work every day and parking downtown and driving home, every person by themselves individually. And so, you know, the question would be, does locking in a certain number of these spots in this garage actually help that, or is making them open to new places help that? I think this is a good place to do a soft push in either direction, as opposed to some of the other things we could do to just say like, hey, you just have to get downtown some other way. But I don't know which way this pushes it. Like just having these parking spaces essentially not available force new people to actually make other arrangements for their employees.
I think in reality, since they are keeping their month-to-month permits, and even when the contract expires, they'll still be able to continue those on a month-to-month basis unless we need to close part of the garage for construction or something like that. I don't think it's going to have a lot of impact on the number of permits that are actually used. So it's really a discussion of should they be contract permits or should they be month-to-month. And I personally, I again see arguments on both sides, but I would probably weigh in with Sandy that maybe cutting it after 2 years or 4 years, so it's not extending out so long, would give them time to figure out their issues with their tenants. So there are lots of ideas out there, but I like Sandy's idea of giving them a much shorter term contract.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
My feeling is they've already got 173 monthly passes. We don't have any plans in the immediate future over this next few years as these other lease obligations start to go away. I'm not sure there's a problem here that we're trying to solve, other than they've kind of made a snafu of their lease arrangements. And I just don't. I tend to agree with Marie that it's not really up to us to fix that. It's not as though they don't have the spaces. They have a boatload of spaces available from a practical point of view. It's just that they've got a legal, contractual problem on their end. As far as I'm concerned, I don't like the idea of setting precedents, and if we're, from a policy point of view, if we're moving in a direction of flexibility and in the parking system to commit spaces specifically in one structure that is already largely obligated with 300 spaces in the county, seems unreasonable to me. It just doesn't seem like our job. So I'm going to vote against this resolution.
I'm on board with John, 100%.
Is there any other comments, discussion?
So are we throwing out any scenarios, or should we go straight off of this contract?
Unless someone is proposing an amendment to the resolution, we are just going to vote this up or down.
Okay.
I will propose an amendment that would strike out the phase 2 and phase 3. That basically they've got a number of parking permits under contract, September 2, 15 to September 1, 2017 at 113 permits, period. Permits under contract would be charged at the standard month to month, not monthly, permit cost plus a 20% surcharge. I'd like to move that.
Do I hear a second to the amendment?
Second.
Any discussion of the amendment? Strictly of the amendment.
I guess the only question is are we proposing something that's literally not possible for them?
Then they can accept it or reject it.
Okay.
This is a counter proposal. It's like I think that our board is pretty clearly split. We don't necessarily want to do this. Sorry, John. We don't necessarily want to do this, but we are sympathetic in that they may have bought into a situation that is slightly beyond their control. But this is it, and it's done.
Any other discussion about the amendment? And although I haven't brushed up on my Robert's Rules of Order, I believe we have to vote on the amendment. Do I?
And whether we.
Yeah, and Joan, you seconded it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Whether, yes, whether we amend.
Accept it as the amendment, except we're not voting on it.
Not
We're
yet.
not voting on
that,
the
we're
resolution,
voting on
we're
the-
voting on the amendment to
amendment.
strike the 2 lines that say September 2nd, 2017 to September 1st, 2019. 80 permits would be lined out, and the line below that, the September 2nd, 2019 to March 31st, 2023, 60 permits. Those two would be stricken. if
And
this
the
amendment
LY
passes.
in the next,
The typo. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No?
No.
Susan, you have the,
3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yes, you have records votes for it passes.
okay. All right. Any more discussion on the now amended resolution before we vote on it?
So we're clear, this is now the amended resolution. If
You're
it
voting.
passes, it goes back to them because this is now not their request. So then when they say no, I should say when, if they say no, we're likely gonna go through this process again.
Well, they would have to come back with.
It would have to come back.
Assuming they're gonna come back with a counter.
It would come back, it would go back to committee for discussion.
Okay.
It really falls to the committee to come back with another recommendation at that point if something were to happen.
So
And basically, if we don't accept anything, it ends.
it ends.
because There
That's
is
the
no
other
agreement beyond
right.
that.
So what is your feeling that this is actually a viable alternative from your
I
conversation?
can't speak to that. I don't know.
Well, that doesn't help me.
So I just have a general permit process question. So they have all these permits already that are servicing the current leases that they have, right? They're month to month. We don't take away month to month permits unless somebody gives them up or stops subscribing to them. So all of their current leases that they've currently signed that have parking spot permits guaranteed in them, presumably, those people, as long as the lease doesn't change hands or they don't write a new lease, are still going to have their permits.
But they're not guaranteed. We don't.
But they
do it
are
as a-
so long as they're continuing to
Sure, but
take
as a-
them, and we don't take them
But
back.
that's,
we don't have a
that's just
guarantee on
been,
that. That's just legal.
that's not even policy. I mean, it's just been the way of doing things.
Right,
We
but so
technically could
not
get them
doing
back.
this unless we decide to do something actively to take away permits. Not approving this and not guaranteeing their spaces likely won't materially change their operations in any manner.
Correct.
The
Except
people
for
who
one-
have
except-
permits will still have permits.
Except for one thing, and I do want you to be aware, we have had to shut down this garage actually for construction and repairs. For our convenience, we booted everybody who didn't have a contract. And then they are on their own. In that case, actually, that was something we then used as a way to get people to try to use transit. But we have had to shut garages for repairs, for the efficiency of just getting everybody out of there, getting work done efficiently. It is a month-to-month arrangement.
And then when it's
We're on
open,
no
do those
obligation.
people get the first opportunity to get
Well,
their permits
as a
back, or is it just open
monthly
again?
permit holder, if they're still paying for it, if they are still a monthly permit holder, they're welcome back in, but we are not under obligation to them. It's not, I want to be clear, under contract, we have to figure out what to do if we go under repair. If it's a month-to-month arrangement, just as they can turn them in, we can take it from them for a repair. We try very hard to keep things stable because we want our business community to have stability, but it is a month-to-month arrangement. You're under no obligation to them, as long as they pay their bill, but that doesn't mean that they can continue to use it and have the same rights as a guaranteed parking permit holder.
So I would say that puts an additional burden on us to be under contract if we have to figure out what to do with you if we're in construction. So there's an additional reason for us not to be.
So under a practical, just to give you a sense, because we're a development authority and not a parking authority, we really do care about the tenants. And in the past, when we've had to close up shop and do repairs, we have figured out with their help some other opportunities for them to accommodate people getting to work every day, because we really don't want to disrupt businesses. But I'm trying to distinguish the practical terminology of a month-to-month permit, which is not just because we've been describing it as similar to, it is not the same thing as a guaranteed parking space. We need to sort of put our head around two different things. That we don't take them back if they continue to make their payments, that's absolutely true. But I'm reserving for you the rights that you have, not just their rights, and trying to figure out a way to say that gently without causing concern out in the rural commercial tenants.
It was just covered.
Okay, good. Any other discussion? All right. Susan, why don't we do a roll call vote on these?
Who gets to do this very often? Okay, a roll call vote on the amended resolution as amended. Roger Hewitt.
Aye.
Marie Clough.
No.
Joan Lowenstein.
Yes.
Al McWilliams.
No.
John Mowat.
No.
Rishi Narayan.
No.
Keith Orr.
Yes?
Steve Powers.
Yes.
Sandy Smith.
Yes.
John Split.
No.
Phil Weiss.
No.
I have 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 yeses. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 noes. It fails.
Okay, resolution fails.
That doesn't happen very often.
No.
Next,
I'm not sure what to do with that.
Now what do we do?
We need a recess. We need a recess.
Everybody go home. Certainly starting out my tenure on a high note here.
The Hewitt administration is just a really negative.
Well, I can see impeachment on the horizon.
Yes.
Next.
Are we ready?
That was
we
our
have
first
now
resolution. Next contract.
I would next like to move the resolution on pages 29 through 33. Resolution to approve a parking contract with Zipcar.
No.
Russ is still here because he misses this too much.
John, you moved the resolution.
yes.
Do I hear a support?
Support.
Support from Keith.
The contract is before you on the following pages. Pages 30, 31, 32, and 33, I believe. And if there are any questions about the contract, I'm going to send them to Susan. Essentially, Zipcar has spaces in our system free of charge reserved at this point. And this is essentially asking for payment of, I believe, starting out $60 per spot, and it goes up from there to 90 in 2016 and 120 in 2017. It's a short-term arrangement, given all that's happening in the areas of transportation, and the Operations Committee is recommending approval of this resolution. And if there are questions, I will.
Clarification: those are monthly rates.
Right.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
And it looks like Zipcar's already signed off on this. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, they have.
And it's for 13 spaces. Okay. Any discussion?
I guess I have questions about being able to, I assume that we can expand the number.
Yes.
If need be. This is just guaranteeing this number of spaces, and if they want more, they can come to us and ask for more.
Absolutely, yes.
Keith?
Yeah, I just think it's a really good agreement. We've supported them because we see it as a great transportation alternative for people who don't want to either bring a car downtown or even own a car downtown. And this sort of gets us to moving off of us supporting them and to Zipcar supporting itself, which has been the case in other communities. So, and it's short term, as has been pointed out. Things are changing quick in terms of how these types of transportation alternatives are happening. So we're not signing in for a 10-year lease or anything like that. So I think it's excellent for us.
Yeah.
I agree with Keith. One thing I'd be interested in seeing, Susan, as they do expand their number of spots is if we could be provided a map periodically of the downtown and where they're located.
Okay. We can do that.
Any other discussion? Okay. We'll vote. All in favor of the resolution, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Much quicker.
All right, next is the July and August parking report, beginning on page 34. There are 2 months here worth of reports, and I will not go through them. If anybody has questions about them, hopefully everybody's read them. I would direct your questions to Mr. Morehouse. Nothing? All right. Quarterly parking numbers and art fair numbers, beginning on page 40. We have both the last quarter parking numbers as well as on page 41 we have our annual numbers. We have revenues increasing in the fourth quarter, 6.92%, and for the year, 6.43%. And again, if anybody has any questions about those numbers, I would direct them to Jeff.
And they're the only fee or rate increases were at the meters, right, for the fiscal year?
No.
No?
We had a rate change in the permits and the meters.
Oh, permits as well, that's right.
Yes. The structure hourly stick remained the same.
Right.
And Joe, I'm sorry, the overall rate increase percentage?
There really is none because each segment had its own percentage
Okay,
increase.
what were, just run by real quickly, if you remember the approximate.
I think the permits went up by $10 a month for each of their classes, and the meter rates went up by 10 cents.
What's the theory on why meter bags are down for the year? Is that just because less construction? Or?
Yes, there were some major projects that finished up,
Yeah.
and the meter bags were released.
And they're the ones that generally pay for the meter bags.
Those are the large, the regular routine maintenance remains about the same.
Right.
So when you have large construction projects that you have a lot of meter bags.
Got it.
We have on page 42 permits by facility by month, and on page 43, and I certainly can't read it, art fair numbers. Revenue is up, although the number of parkers, because we had a price increase, the overall number of parkers during art fair was down. You will see on page 44 a graphic display of that.
Down a lot.
That's largely Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, I would point out that 2014 was exceptional weather. We had beautiful weather all 4 days. And Friday and Saturday were not quite as good this year, weather-wise, which does have an impact.
Any other questions about those numbers? Okay, moving on then. The parking TDM study status. The existing conditions portion of the study is almost complete, and Nelson Nygaard, who is conducting the study, will be in town in late September for a site visit. And if there are any other questions about that, I would direct them towards Amber, I think. Construction at 4th and William. There have been some issues, as some of you may have noticed, the project's been sitting still for a while. There have been issues with column alignment, and they are being addressed. We have a solution, and work will begin again today. I believe they will start to make adjustments. You may see some of what's been put up taken down, but by the end of next week, I believe that the stair tower construction should be complete, and work on glass curtain wall, et cetera, will begin.
Our signatures come down?
Not unless somebody decides to, no.
Would you mind backing up to the art fair for
Not at all.
just a moment? So I didn't realize this when I looked at it before, that the number of tickets are down, but the revenue's still up 8%. Was that,
We had a price increase of, we went from $12 to $15 during the day
Right.
and 6 to 7 at night, so.
Right.
Again, how all that works out, but the daytime is a 25% increase, and overall, it's a pretty significant
That's
increase.
right. Thank you.
Well, one I can answer. Structure repairs, the annual structure maintenance work is on schedule. Interior work at Maynard and Forest is ending, exterior work at Forest continues, and work at 4th and Washington will begin this week. Any questions about structure repair? And I don't believe, Keith, that you have anything?
No.
Okay.
The only thing I would have had would have been about the bike house, and
Okay.
covered that in the executive director report.
That concludes Operations Committee. Our next meeting is Wednesday, September 16th, earlier than usual, at 11 a.m.
Question, perhaps for Joe or Susan or for the committee, library lane maintenance is finished. That was part of the
Jada probably could.
scheduled maintenance of our structures.
Referring to repair work?
Just if you could touch on briefly, the library lane structure maintenance work is part of our scheduled maintenance work on all of our structures.
Currently, they're working in the campus area structures, and that work will be finishing in the next week or so, and then we'll be moving over to Ann Ashton for structures at that point in time.
Because library lane is moving into the list.
The small work at library then I think was completed up front, and all done there.
Given the age of the structure, I'm assuming there's not a lot of maintenance work to do.
No, there's a very small item that had to be taken care of.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Next, Finance Committee, Marie?
So we went over the unaudited financial statements, and Joe did a great job of getting them ready right away, so we were a little ahead of schedule, so good job, Joe. We also had some discussion about the accounting and procedure manual for the DDA, and we had some discussion over internal controls for the collection of the parking revenue. And I would throw this out to, if anybody has any questions, either Joe or Roger. And we also discussed a potential change to the travel policy for those attending the conference in San Francisco, and it was voted not to change and increase the per diem rate. That's it. Next committee meeting is next Tuesday, the 22nd.
Thank you.
Marie runs a tight ship.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions at all? No? All right, then we'll move on. Capital Improvements Committee. John?
Thank you. So the committee met, inaugural meeting. We encourage others to come to future meetings as you have time available. There are really 4 bullet items. You'll see 3 on the first page and 1 on the second page of the items we discussed. An important one, the most important one in my opinion, is the very first one, the goals and vision for upcoming projects. As a consultant, I know very well that consultants need clear direction on what folks are trying to accomplish and what those goals are. And so a lot of our discussion was about talking about other cities that we've enjoyed things in, what kind of big picture vision could we see for these 4 projects, with the idea that all of them have some very functional needs. You know, obviously pedestrian connections are critical in all of them, bicycles, all the sort of stuff we're kind of used to, I guess, put it that way, and the street design manual speaks to. But the thing that I thought was most interesting of the conversation was the idea that evolved over the discussion of the idea that each of these projects may have their own character in they may really be trying to sort of express somewhat different things. And, you know, as a placeholder, some of the things we talked about was the idea of Carytown becoming very much a neighborhood, and any of those things that speak to the scale and that feel of a neighborhood we thought was significant. The on Huron, aside from its crucial role to have that trying to connect between north and south, one thing that we discussed was the idea that it really is an opportunity to maybe be an environmental showcase, with the idea of being able to have real live trees of some scale, being able to do some creative stormwater management, and just kind of express Ann Arbor's being the tree city and its greenness. We talked about State Street. You know, it seems like an interesting opportunity to maybe consider, when it comes along, even expanding the scope of it, so as to look at how to capture the character of the university and how it associates with the university right across the street. And there may be some ideas that we could share with the university and how that might get expressed. And then the last one, you know, South U, you know, obviously it's heavily pedestrian, heavily students, and it might be an interesting opportunity to do something that's a little kind of edgy and hip. You know, if you know there are places where people do temporary sculptures, or do, you know, I don't know what that may mean, but something a little different. And you know, from my point of view, what this does is it helps address the notion that the street design manual isn't intended to be a strictly prescriptive book of everything looking the same and being the same. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here with these very distinctive projects to lend that character, and the more that we can express that to our consultants, I think is helpful. The next major item we talked about was project timing and methods of public input. And so we looked at a timetable for projects. We discussed the various tools in the toolbox for how to engage the public in the conversations and our street associations, et cetera, et cetera. If anybody wants some more detail on that, I guess I'd ask Amber or Susan to jump in and describe something. And then the third thing is this RFQ that Susan alluded to. We had a good conversation about that with the notion of the schedule, with the schedule and public input piece as being a critical part to that. One of the critical things that was the notion of a single contractor would take the project on, and a single design team would take the project on jointly with the city. When we look at Carytown, for instance, it makes a lot of sense to manage it as a single project. I think there's cases to be made of whether it's a DDA managed project or a city managed project, and that remains to be seen. But the basic concept is that there are efficiencies of having one design team and one contractor team. So those were some of the bits and pieces we talked about for moving forward with this RFQ. And as Susan alluded to earlier, we'll be receiving those back. I'd be very interested in people being involved in looking at the proposals and sitting in on interviews whenever possible. I'd like to get people's involvement. I mean, this is, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways, at least having been on this board for a while, to me, this is the fun stuff. These are actual real projects we're kind of getting back to. So I really encourage people to kind of lend their ideas, their support, and make it good. John?
John, I'm sorry, my mind wandered for a moment. We are talking about going out with this RFQ. Which specifically projects are we addressing this time around?
Good point. The first two are Carytown and South U, and then Huron and State Street would be the second two. Now, one of the things that we made an adjustment to the RFQ in was to describe that, it's possible we may want to extend the contract of the design team and just keep kind of rolling into the next two, at least to give us that opportunity, or we could consider going out for, starting the process over again. But at this point, the focus will be on these first two projects. But I would say that I think having those initial discussions about vision and values for all of them is valuable, it's worthwhile.
Any questions for John?
Yeah, the only other little tidbit is on sidewalk repairs. It's focused on repair and replacement this summer. There may be some work being done at crosswalks here pretty soon. And one thing that, actually, I guess I would ask if somebody can tell us about tree replacements, of kind of the status of where things are with tree replacements. It's probably the single biggest thing I get bugged about. People are just really anxious about all the dead trees.
Sure. Well, our contract spanned 2 seasons, and we have completed that. So we planted about 114 trees. And now the city forester is going back out and re-inventorying because there are quite a few dead trees. So once we have a better understanding of the full scope of that, then we'll work with the city to talk about what our role might be.
Does the city have any goals for this fall, or is it really just do an inventory and potentially next spring starting over again?
Next spring would be the next planting.
Great, thank you.
And I think,
Steve?
I was just gonna add, I think, and as part of that inventory, part of that review is also trying to determine the cause of the fatality, the mortality of the trees.
Yeah, that's correct.
Excellent
Because
point.
they were concentrated in certain areas.
Tree aside.
We're gonna make sure there are trees in front of the Michigan Theater marquee. Big leafy ones.
Make sure it's all covered up. Yeah.
We want to suburbanize you, Russ. That's all I've got. Our next meeting is September 23rd at 11 a.m. It's a Wednesday.
John? Next, Partnerships and Economic Development Committee, Joan and Al.
Yes, we had a July meeting and we didn't have any meetings in August. So we continued at our July meeting to talk about the whole issue of grant requests because grants traditionally have come into the Partnerships Committee. And so we've kind of gone around and around on this, and we'll continue to talk a little bit more about it, about whether we need to have strict grant requirements in terms of time, and also in terms of a lot of criteria about whether we should be saving our money for a lot of smaller grants or saving our money for some bigger grants. So we will talk some more about that grant process at our meeting, which is next week, next Wednesday, and that's at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Any questions for Joan?
I don't know if you have anything to add, Al?
Okay.
I don't.
I'm getting a roll here. Okay, moving on to the Executive Committee.
I do have an item from the Executive Committee. In the minutes, you would have seen a resolution that we passed last month, and it's on page 11 and 12. And there was, as my role as secretary, I noticed that there was a slight error. And I have a resolution that should be in front of everybody to replace that. So I would like to move this forward after noting that the only change in this is that there was an inaccurate number stated for a starting salary, and that the starting salary is properly adjusted to $114,575, and it will be raised the 2.75, which was what the city's is it an average? The city's annual increase was to 117,726. So that is the only change, is the 114 and the 117 numbers, and I would like to move this.
I hear support.
Support.
Second. And one quick thing too, just as background, part of this was that we had tried to align with the city, and it wasn't clear originally exactly where it was. I think we pegged it at 2.5%. So there were some conversations about that too. So this helps to kind of clarify all that with the city.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Resolution passes. Any other report from the executive committee? Any new business?
So I would like to just, and I'm not sure which committee this would be, but I'm serious about a renaming of the parking structure. And I don't know whether that's, maybe all of them need to take a look at it. We just name it like William Street. It's like, oh, how exciting is that? It's like, but what about an identity or an area? And part of the thing I've been wrestling with for a little while is that we've got people in Carytown that don't recognize there's a parking structure right there because it's not visually obvious. But by renaming it, it becomes the district's parking garage. And I had proposed a while ago doing something with the farmer's market because people circle around on Saturdays and that structure is empty at the time. And they just don't see it. They can't, for whatever reason, it's not visible as the closest place. And it's easy to get to. So by branding it like that, it may solve a problem. So I'm giving that to the operations committee to chew on.
Put it on the agenda for the next committee meeting.
Yes.
So can I ask just for clarification,
Yes.
so we know our assignment? So if we were to work to say, re-sign, name it on the building, or are you asking us to work through the city to actually do something formal? Can we work just to visually communicate that? Or is it a formal change in the name of the building?
You know, I really would look at Steve's, I don't know what the city process would have to do with that.
Just saying, because there's contracts and all that kind of good stuff. So let me guide you back to, can we work toward a signage?
Of course.
Improvement as a place to begin?
Absolutely. I don't think the general public cares about contracts.
Right, I think this is the equivalent of like the corporate name in the DBA.
As long as it says the Sandys have Carytown. With a hefty donation associated for naming rights.
All right, this is very helpful.
Yeah, I'll just say that we will promise to chew on it at operation.
Fantastic.
The Michigan Theater, State Theater, Bader Street parking structure. Bam.
And the Williams structure.
Then the Williams.
What was that?
Okay.
Yeah. All we have to do is
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other new business?
I will run with it. No, good.
I have one more thing, and I'm not really sure what committee it would go to, but I had asked, what is the amount of money that the DDA has spent over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years on external project managers? It seems like we have quite a few capital projects coming up, and I don't think 4 people is a lot of people in the organization that manages this amount of money and has this, significant projects. I'd like to explore potentially adding a staff member as 2 things. One is potentially a cost savings, depending on what has been spent externally from project managers, but 2, to kind of bring that management formally in-house, I think is worth looking into. I'm not sure what committee.
Maybe finance committee, that's okay?
All right, I'd be happy to look into it.
Give that project to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other new business? Any audience participation?
Never to refuse the opportunity. On his last question about the Carytown parking structure rename, one of the things I see in French cities like Grenoble, they have signs not simply on the parking structure but in choice point areas that would direct so many vacancies in the Carytown structure with an arrow that could identify that structure with the market area to direct people that way. And there are that many spaces available there that keeps changing. And as you recall, or some, a few years ago I was here suggesting that in the winter we have a skating rink on the parking lot which hopefully will become an urban park with some degree of indeterminacy about what building might be there in terms of all that going on. But if the city council showed any indication of wanting to encourage public use, that would be a first thing to see as a possibility in the winter. And when I presented this last time, I had people who said, well, we'll put in about half the money, and if DDA would put in more, that could be a functioning activity for the winter that would be very nice for everyone. So I'll just add that in. Aside from the long term, in the short term, the winter skating rink would be very nice in the center of town, and you folks could be greatly facilitating of that should you think positively in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Ed Bilmetti. A couple things. First of all, I want to thank Russ Collins for coming back in front of this group and using his time effectively. Looking forward to seeing improvements to the to the State Theater. It's a theater that's gone through some turmoil in its history, and it wasn't always clear that it was going to stay a theater, and I think that the DDA could really do a service to the community by supporting that effort. A second thing regarding the Operations Committee, I was at the Operations Committee meeting when it happened last week. One of the items that came up on the agenda at that time was a discussion of some facilities that Republic Parking had used that were not strictly in accordance with its contract, specifically setting up monitoring operations for other parking structures in other cities and use of employees to support other functions. I looked at the minutes that were recorded for that meeting and was surprised not to see a longer discussion of that recorded in those minutes. And I will say only that I don't know the sums involved or the magnitude of this deviation from expectations, but I'm hopeful that the DDA will set this straight. The discussion at the Operations Committee also included reminders to the committee that the Republic Parking contract is up for renewal in a relatively short amount of time since it's a 2-year cycle. Having reviewed the contract, there is a substantial financial implication to the DDA for terminating that contract short because the Republic loaned the DDA some sum of money to install new equipment. So I'd love to see the DDA address that all those issues forthrightly and with thorough documentation in the minutes that it's keeping for itself and for the public. Thank you.
Just for clarification, Joe, could you come to the podium? Just for clarification, Republic Parking reimbursed the DDA for all expenses, both personnel and facilities,
Yes.
correct?
After the general manager left, we reviewed everything, added up all the charges that were misapplied.
Mm-hmm.
It came to a total of $8,500, which based upon a total yearly annual transfer of $5.7 million was a very small amount, and that was repaid to the DDA.
Okay. And when does the Republic Parking contract expire?
June 30th, 2017.
Okay. So it has a little over 2 years to run still.
Less than 2 years.
A little less than 2 years to run. Okay, thank you.
So you're saying $8,500 was the amount that was from other cities or other, that should have been billed on our account and they've refunded it already?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other audience participation? I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support, all in favor?
So moved.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
One of the days I'm just going to say,